Okay, here we are with G2B, operating courtesy, band plans, emergencies including drill, and emergency communications. Which of the following is true concerning access to frequencies? No one has priority access to frequencies. Common courtesy should be a guide. Generally, if you hear someone using a frequency that you had planned on using, then you'll let them go ahead and continue there and go somewhere else. But if it's necessary to use that frequency, talk with them and explain the situation and see if something can't be worked out. But generally, the rule is act like grown-ups. So not all hams are good at that, incidentally. What's the first thing you should do if you're communicating with another station and hear a station in distress break in? Acknowledge the station in distress and determine what assistance may be needed. Anytime that you hear a station with a distress message or a station experiencing distress, you should find out how you can help them. If the propagation changes during your contact and you notice increasing interference from other activity on the same frequency, what should you do? As a common courtesy, move your contact to another frequency. When selecting a CW transmitting frequency, what minimum frequency separation should you allow in order to minimize interference to stations on adjacent frequencies? CW is the narrowest bandwidth of any of the modes that we use, and but it still does have a bandwidth, and you need separation of about 150 to 500 hertz to avoid interfering with other stations, or to avoid having them interfere with you also. What's the customary frequency separation between single sideband signals under normal conditions? Approximately 3 kilohertz for the single sideband voice signals. And remember, they're on the 60-meter band. The FCC limit on the bandwidth is 2.8 kilohertz, so that fits very closely with the 3 kilohertz here. What is a practical way to avoid harmful interference when selecting a frequency to call CQ on CW or phone? If you have your Q codes print out there with you, you see that QRL means is anyone using this frequency? Or is there anybody here? Followed by your call sign. Or if you're using phone, ask if the frequency is in use, followed by your call sign. Usually if there's someone who can hear you who is using the frequency, they will let you know, and then you can say thank you and go elsewhere. Which of the following complies with good amateur practice when choosing a frequency on which to initiate a call? Follow the voluntary band plan for the operating mode you intend to use. Okay, and here is an example of a band plan, and hopefully you'll be able to see some of that. You may not be able to make out all of the fine print down here, but this is an example of the band. This is the ARRL band plan for the 10-meter band, and the colored parts you see over here are what the FCC has by FCC regulation, what they've allocated. So for novices and technicians, we have this little segment right here where novices and technicians can use voice. And we have the red segment here where everybody can use Morse code, CW. And then the blue is voice. Now, and in this particular band, for generals, advanced, and extra class, they all have the same privileges. They also have the same CW privileges, all have the same voice privileges on the band. But if we look at the frequencies here, we can see that some frequencies or groups of frequencies, ranges of frequencies, have been set aside for various things. Let's start up at the top here And we can see that up here we have frequencies that are set aside for the outputs of FM repeaters on this very upper end of the 10-meter band. Okay, and then there are some simplex frequencies in here. And then there are inputs for frequencies here. Okay, so we'd have your repeater inputs here, your repeater outputs here. Okay, in here are frequencies that are set aside for satellite downlinks. A lot of the amateur satellites have downlinks in the 10-meter band, and those downlinks will fall in here. Okay, here's a segment that's been set aside for AM. Now you know that single sideband is AM, but what they're talking about here is double sideband AM using the carrier. In other words, the older style of amplitude modulation. Some operators like to use it because, for one thing, it has better voice fidelity than single sideband does. And I stumbled into a conversation in this range, transmitting upper sideband, and the guy said, "Sounds like you're using single sideband." And I said, "Oh, excuse me a second," pushed AM, and then we went ahead and had our conversation. So I didn't hear any difference from him, but he could definitely tell a difference with me, because for AM the voice fidelity is much better, but the single sideband serves the purpose for most communications. Here we have slow scan TV in this range. Here we have some voice. Here we have a DX calling frequency. So this is where you might hear your CQDX that we were talking about earlier. Here's a calling frequency for low power operation, QRP operation. Okay, and some other additional set aside frequencies down in here. What's the DX window in a voluntary band plan? It's a portion of the band that should not be used for contacts between stations within the 48 contiguous states. Okay, so that's where you're going to find the people that are looking for long-distance communications. And like I pointed out here in Hawaii, everybody's DX, except for other Hawaiians. Who may be the control operator of an amateur station transmitting in RACES, that's the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service, to assist relief operations during a disaster? A correct answer is only a person holding an FCC-issued amateur operator license. When may the FCC restrict normal frequency operations of stations participating in RACES? When the President's war emergency powers have been invoked. This one kind of surprised me. I thought there would be some lesser occasions, but this at least is, of the answers they give you, is the one that's correct. What frequency should be used to send a distressed call? Whatever frequency has the best chance of communicating the distress message. Now, this is an interesting question and answer, because if the frequency that has the best chance of communicating the distress message is police dispatch frequency, and you're able to operate there, you are legal there if it's a genuine emergency. You may have to do some explaining with the police chief later on, but if you can communicate your distress and it is a genuine emergency, you're legal as far as the FCC is concerned. So whichever one has the best chance of communicating the distress message is the right answer. For your conversation with the police chief, I would suggest that you try to contact some other hams first, and so you can tell him that you tried and it didn't work. When is an amateur station allowed to use any means at its disposal to assist another station in distress? Anytime during an actual emergency.